Welcome back. Our first guest today is a celebrated entrepreneur, community leader, and author. He has a unique perspective on anti-Black racism stemming from his mixed race upbringing.
And his new book called Black and White, an intimate, multicultural perspective on white advantage and the paths to real change, Stephen Dorsey takes an inclusive and accessible approach to societal changes needed to address diversity, inclusion, and systemic racism. And we welcome Stephen to the show today. Hello.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
Great to have you with us. Well, listen, let's go back to this because your journey in this book began with the Black Lives Matter movement. And we know it started with a hashtag, it then grew into a global movement. But you say that for you, this was a major personal awakening. So take us through what happened.
Oh, exactly. Well, first of all, it took me a while to just even want to watch the video of the George Floyd murder. And then I finally did and had a tremendous impact on me. I was shocked, I was sad, I was angry. And then I fielded tons of calls and emails from friends and peers and neighbors, mostly white people asking me, am I okay? What are you thinking? What should I be thinking? What should I be doing? And that really kind of got me to jump into the discourse of the time, and using my communication skills, I started writing articles and engaging people. And at the same time, my brother and I, who's a year older, we were talking about our experience with lived experiences with racism as kids and growing up, and everything just converged, and it was time for me to lead, which is what led to me writing the book.
Because of your mixed race background, you've described sort of living with one foot in both the white and Black worlds. So talk about how you coped with finding your identity while growing up.
Well, it's a good question. So when I was a kid, I didn't really think of myself as Stephen the Black kid. Of course, I looked different, but I was just a kid, trying to make my way. And as I got older, I realized that, my Blackness had an impact on other people, but a lot of it negatively. And then I started, I grew up in white neighborhoods, went to white schools, but, I started trying to understand my Blackness. I was actually a Black man. And so investigated my roots and just tried to understand how I fit in. So that really led me to today, where, I'm in my community. I'm one of the few visible minorities and Black people in my neighborhood. And so I have always reacted to that. And at the same time, my family's all white. Most of my friends are white. So I have this duality. So it's actually forced me to really go do the work to find out who I am, where I belong, how I fit in. And so that's the work I've done. And really, in my book, that's what I'm asking people to do for themselves, to get a greater awareness of systemic racism in our society.
Yeah, you were speaking to all the mixed kids out there. Let me tell you about that. And you do share, you share a lot of your lived experiences in your book, but perhaps the hardest one that you share, it was tough, being abandoned by your mother and your stepfather when you were just 14. It feels like, I don't know what question to ask other than, how did that impact you?
Well, it was really destabilizing, that's for sure. It's a hard lesson or a hard feeling to realize that you're disposable. So, and of course, all of the realities of what happened with the courts, and then becoming a ward of the court as a foster child, and bouncing from home to home, and being separated from my brother who was in a different foster home. So that was destabilizing. I got a little bit angry, and then I kind of was resilient and perseverance, and I was lucky enough to land with an amazing family, a foster family, the Vipon family, who embraced me, and they've never gotten rid of me since. And that really helped. And really, I'm very resilient, perseverance, a lot of hard work, and there was a lot of headwinds, but I just persevered and moved forward.
So the Black Lives Matter movement has helped make white privilege a widely discussed topic since at least 2020, but you prefer to call it white advantage. Why is that?
Well, the reason is, as I mentioned, I had hundreds and hundreds of conversations. And when the topic of white privilege, everyone went right to the word privilege. Stephen, I'm not privileged. I come from humble beginnings. I worked hard for everything I have. I said, no, 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 it's not about that. We're talking about advantage. And many of them you may not know because simply you're advantaged because of the color of because you're white, right? We're talking about all the systemic disadvantages that people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, and others have faced for centuries and still today solely as a result of their race, right? And so we know this from the data in education system, in healthcare, in policing, and the judicial system. So that's really what we're talking about. And I found using white advantage seemed to make it easier for people to understand.
I think that's powerful. Now, many public figures and organizations have been known to push back against the reality of systemic anti-Black racism prevalent in North America. So how then can this deep-rooted issue really be addressed?
Well, I think, first of all, systemic racism is real. So I think what we need is to convince as many people in Canada that it is real, to go do the work for themselves to get the understanding. I've tried to do my part by putting a lot of examples in my book. You know, I was saying to someone the other day, I have 350 footnotes in my book. So I've gone to get the data, and it's there so you can read it. Don't just rely on my information. Go do the work for yourself. Then once there's a broader awareness, people hopefully will have their own awakening that they want to say and do something to make change happen. And for those governments and other institutions that are pushing back, we're going to have to push against the status quo, and I think get to the change, the reforms that we need to change the system of the institutions, and hopefully together we will get to a place where we'll be able to live better together and have a more just and equal society.
You get right into the really complicated stuff in your book. You talk about bias, you talk about prejudice. These are very, very complicated matters because, as you discuss, yes, even racialized individuals have been guilty of being biased or prejudiced at some point in their lives as well. So from your own experience, how can people then bring about a positive change?
Well, as I mentioned, I think you have to do the work. I tell in my book about my own bias and prejudice, and I grew up in Victoria, BC, after we moved from Montreal, and the real bias and prejudice in Victoria was really targeted at Indigenous people. And of course, I'm young and stupid and said stupid things and made stupid jokes and jokes I'm ashamed of today. But as I got older, I started understanding more about Indigenous people, the realities that they face, the discrimination, the attempted genocide by the society. And then in 2008, I had an amazing engagement with Phil Fontaine, who was then the chief of the Assembly First Nation, who actually shared his residential story with us, which was devastating, by the way, and really impacted me. And I had a chance to talk to him, and I told him that I was going to do better with what I learned and go learn for myself, and I did. And then I've had opportunities through policy making in my community and now in my book to bring light to the story of discrimination of Indigenous people, Black people, and people of color. And I think everybody, if they take the time, can transcend their own bias and prejudice by going to do the work, learning for themselves, and changing their behavior.
You know, I think that's where we'll probably end on, like, you know, how far have we really come since the Black Lives Matter movement happened? And according to you, what do you think the next steps are?
Well, I think we have made progress. There's more awareness. So let's start there. I think the governments are trying here and there. Corporations are trying. Individuals are getting more informed. So I'm an optimist. I feel hopeful there. But I think the real heavy lifting is going to be the reforms of the systems. And I think that we need people to have an understanding of the truths, the reconciliation around those truths, and then everybody has to come together and do the work for reform so that we can get to the place where we have more equality and systemic racism hopefully is a thing of the past.
Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your personal journey and story with us.
Thanks for having me, and happy Black History Month.
It is Black History Month, and so everyone watching, the book is called Black and White. Go and get a copy. It's available everywhere now. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.